So, good morning. In his prize-winning 1985 novel, Love in the Time of Cholera, Gabriel Garcia Marquez, also known as Gabo, wrote, "No, not rich. I am a poor man with money," which is not the same thing. Today, I'd like to discuss how our global food system's focus on money is leaving humanity with poor nutrition, poor water and air quality, poor soils, poor human relations, and a climate poorly suited to our survival. Situations made all the more apparent by the current pandemic. And more importantly, I'd like to share ways that the coronavirus also shines a light on how a food system based on people's right relationships with each other and the rest of the natural world could produce a rich climate with an abundance of healthy land, air, water, and food for all of Earth's creatures, including us. Speaking of COVID-19 and social distancing, I would like to offer a lot of gratitude to Biodiversity for a Livable Climate and everyone who did such an admirable job of pivoting from the in-person conference that was planned to this wonderful online conference. And if you find nothing else of value in my presentation, I hope you will at least offer me a little gratitude for not focusing on Gabo's most famous book that might feel a little too well suited to these times, 100 Years of Solitude. Instead, I will focus on some of the harsh realities that he mixed so seamlessly with the magical in his writing. Hunger has been on the rise again since 2015, with the majority of those going hungry living in rural areas. Does it strike anyone else as wrong, not just that there is still hunger in our world, but also that most of the world's hungry are in farming communities? Or have we just come to accept that our current food system doesn't usually look like this, but instead looks like this? Most farmers borrow money to buy foreign machinery and chemical inputs that suppress nature and warm the climate. The farmers grow a small number of nutritionally poor crops to sell for money to buy food, if they're lucky. In many cases, the crops fall prey to pests, disease, drought, or flooding, or there's not a good market for the crop come harvest time. And the farmer is left with no money for food, not to mention for maintaining the farm, and an often insurmountable debt. Crops that do make it to market and the food farmers consume frequently travel across countries or even across the globe, adding to greenhouse gas emissions. According to the FAO, 1 of every 5 calories people eat have crossed at least one international border, up more than 50% from 40 years ago. Even national supply chains are a complex web of interactions involving farmers, inputs such as fertilizers, seeds, and veterinary medicines, processing plants, freight distributors, retailers, financial institutions, and more. So it should come as no surprise that hunger is most often tied to declining commodity prices and increasing food prices. According to hunger organization Bread for the World, poverty is the major cause of hunger, and 3/4 of people living in extreme poverty live in rural communities. The coronavirus pandemic exacerbates all of these problems, making it even harder for farmers to access credit, buy inputs, market their crops, or purchase food, as transportation and manufacturing are restricted or even shut down. Workers on corporate farms and in food processing plants add the coronavirus to an already long list of dangers they face in difficult but low-paying jobs. COVID-19 shows us that not only does our current food and agriculture system, which is a leading cause of greenhouse gas emissions, regularly fail to feed nearly 1 billion people, contaminate our air and water, and degrade our soils, diminishing their future potential to produce food, but it also breaks down still further in the face of a pandemic like COVID-19. So what do we say in the face of a system that sickens consumers, suppresses nature, and exploits workers? Gabo said, "To oppression, we respond with life. And what's more, life is the best thing that has ever been invented." At Sustainable Harvest International, we fully believe in this philosophy. And for 23 years, we have helped farmers embrace life, or in other words, nature, to produce an abundance of healthy food, like on this farm in Panama, that promotes biodiversity instead of killing all but 2 or 3 desired species, and finds that healthy ecosystems, both above the ground and in the soil, produce an abundance of crops without costly external inputs. Regenerative agriculture is a term now commonly used to describe this type of farming that embraces and enhances the life found in natural ecosystems by minimizing soil disturbance, maximizing crop diversity, keeping the soil covered, maintaining living roots year-round, and often integrating livestock. The way Sustainable Harvest International spreads regenerative agroecology practices is by hiring local field trainers, each of whom works with a cohort of smallholder farmers and their families, visiting them every week or two for several years, sharing new practices that build one on the other and on the farmer's existing knowledge. These are the trainers on our Panama team. Juan Jose Perez is the newest, having worked with SHI since 2006, providing technical assistance to 30 families in 2 communities. Alberto Rivera and his wife Felicia Naves are one couple who have worked with Juan Jose since 2016. When I visited them in 2017, they were already growing a diverse abundance of food and had created terraced garden beds held in place with stone walls and live barriers. Soil improved with compost and other organic matter was nourishing healthy and productive pepper plants, tomatoes, and other vegetables on the terraces. Below the terraces, papaya trees, celery, and corn grew alongside each other in more enriched soil, as well as grenadine vines whose fruit hung from a handmade trellis. To add more protein to their diet, Alberto and Felicia had planted their first soybeans in soil enriched with composted chicken manure and rice hulls and mulched with leaves and pruning from the balo trees, or Gliricidia sapium, in their live fence. Above the house, more tomatoes were protected by planters made from discarded tires, while pineapples and other crops grew on more terraces. The barren hillside in the distance is typical of land in this area, and that particular piece of land belongs to Felicia's father, who they hope will let them plant trees and other crops on it in an agroforestry plantation. That is just part of the plan that Alberto and Felicia made with Juan Jose for their remaining years in the SHI program. And what they had already accomplished in their first year was so impressive. Here's how Felicia described it, and I hope the video is going to work for me. It was giving me difficulty before.
When we started here, we've already been living here 16 years. We planted but produced nothing. Everything died in the dry season. It was worse. Then with Sustainable Harvest, we've overcome the poor soil with organic practices. And when the Peace Corps volunteer and SHI extensionist came, we didn't believe. And I said to my husband, this can't be, because we've tried for 15 years and produced nothing. But they told us that yes, it was possible, that we had to learn new techniques. And we started along with other families here to work, and we harvested corn. And there too, we've harvested a variety of things. And we're very happy with all the new techniques we're learning with Sustainable.
Okay, hope that worked all right. Since my visit back in 2017, Alberto, Felicia, and their children have continued to increase their harvests by improving the soil. These photos were taken at the end of last year. And even during this pandemic, when many more people are having a hard time finding food, Alberto and Felicia's son sent this photo to show us that they are continuing with the new techniques they've learned, and they are thriving. I find it appropriate that we got this photo just a week or so ago on Earth Day, not just because they are growing their crops in healthy earth, but because they are taking the pressure of agricultural expansion off nearby forests by using practices that allow them to grow an abundance of crops in a small area, rather than having to repeatedly clear more large areas of forest to take the place of land degraded by chemicals, burning, erosion, and compaction. This is preserving the natural biodiversity of these forests and allowing them to continue acting as a carbon sink, just as carbon is being drawn down out of the atmosphere into the trees and other permanent plants on Alberto and Felicia's land, as well as into the organic material they are adding to the soils. The 2015 Status of the World's Soil Resources report highlights that more carbon resides in soil than in the atmosphere and all plant life combined. However, in March 2017, the FAO reported that roughly 33% of the world's soils are degraded, which has led to large losses of soil organic carbon. Soils from various global agroecosystems, such as croplands and grazing lands, have lost 25 to 75% of their original soil organic carbon, depending on climate, soil type, and historic management. This amounts to 42 to 78 billion tons of carbon. The FAO report goes on to say that these losses provide an opportunity, since the recoverable carbon reserve capacity of the world's agricultural and degraded soils is estimated to be between 21 to 51 billion tons of carbon. And that's not to mention the trees being planted in agroforestry systems as part of this integrated approach to farming. The Global Tree Restoration Potential Report, published in Science in July 2019, shows that the restoration of forested land at a global scale could increase the world's forested area by 25%, capturing 200 billion tons of atmospheric carbon at maturity. Tom Crowther, a researcher at ETH Zurich and senior author of the report, says that while it doesn't alter the vital importance of protecting existing forests and phasing out fossil fuels, since new forests would take decades to mature, if we act now, this could cut carbon dioxide in the atmosphere by up to 25%, to levels last seen almost a century ago, end quote. It is this critical imperative to act now that's led SHI to join Regeneration International, the Regenerative Agriculture Alliance, the 4 per Thousand Initiative, and many other groups working to stabilize the climate with regenerative farming. Large-scale farms are and must be part of this movement, but it is going to take a big effort to convince those that have millions of dollars invested in the old way of doing things to switch to this new ecologically based approach. But I think the low-hanging fruit of climate stabilization, especially to begin with, is helping smallholder farmers in the global south who have so much to gain by making this transition and so little to lose. As I mentioned at the start of my presentation, the majority of people going hungry live in areas where they could be growing their own food. And with the right techniques, they could grow plenty of that food with little or no external inputs or financing. All over the world, they are embracing this opportunity when given the chance. I founded Sustainable Harvest International 23 years ago to help smallholder farmers make this transition to agriculture based on the life inherent in nature, rather than death by fire or chemicals. Over the years, as Gabo says in Love in the Time of Cholera, I discovered to my joy that it is life, not death, that has no limits. Just listen to the life that this farmer in Honduras is finding in the time of COVID-19 in this video that he sent us just a few days ago.
Hola, ¿qué tal? Soy Nelson Silva Alvarado, propietario de este huerto aquí en el Caliche, Cibotepec, Comayagua, Honduras. Mando un saludo especial pues, a todos los que hacen posible, pues, que han hecho posible para que este huerto pues, esté aquí activado, y también a todo el personal administrativo, técnicos de campo, que son los que más han estado cerca de nosotros, y también a las familias donantes, para que yo, y al igual que todos los que estamos unidos en este proceso de cosecha sostenible, pues estamos bien felices porque en nuestro huerto pues, cultivamos la yuca. Aquí las pueden ver, están sembradas. Tenemos también acá el camote, tenemos camote por acá, lo vamos a ver, por acá vamos a poner esto acá. Estamos con los camotes, pues aquí los tenemos. Tenemos las habichuelas, contamos con lo que es el ajo, tenemos el culantro de Castilla, también tenemos por acá, pues, para preparar los alimentos, lo que es el plátano, también contamos con el banano, que ustedes pues pueden ver que aquí los cultivamos en esta parcelita, donde también con el apoyo de cosecha sostenible pues se ha recuperado, pues antes era un predio ahí donde terminaban bestias, pero que ahora pues ya lo ocupamos para nuestros alimentos. Seguimos por acá, ustedes pueden ver acá el huerto, y así como miran pues los demás compañeros pues así los mantenemos para poder estar. Ya no podemos ir al mercado, más con esta pandemia que se ha venido a nivel mundial, pues ya los mercados van a cerrar. Estamos aquí porque aquí venimos nosotros a cosechar nuestros productos para nuestros alimentos propios, y de los que también los compañeros no tengan allá, pues yo tengo acá, y hacemos un intercambio de productos para poder preparar nuestros alimentos y libre de toda contaminación. Y pues pueden ver ustedes las cebollas. Tenemos aquí también pues las cebollas, ¿ves? Vamos a arrancar unas matitas para que ustedes miren, ¿ves? Las cebollas, son cebollas. Aquí están los arreates. Tenemos también la sábila o aloe. Ajá. Voy a continuar por acá. Aquí tenemos pues el garbanzo, aquí, el repollo. Por acá tenemos el amaranto, chile, orégano, y por acá pues está el producto de la malanga. Aquí pueden ver ustedes la malanga. Y entonces después esto es todo lo que tenemos. Le agradecemos a ustedes, pues los demás compañeros, tenemos nuestras parcelas por allá ya un poquito más amplias, pero por motivo de esta pandemia pues que nos ha venido a nivel mundial, algunos compañeros productores pues han tenido que vender sus productos porque no hay acceso de vehículos para acá, pues ver pues sólido, no hay nada, estamos en cuarentena casi todos porque no hay acceso de vehículos para llevar nuestros productos al mercado, y eso pues los ha perjudicado porque de los productos que sacamos pues recaudamos algunos recursos económicos para fortalecer el crecimiento de nuestra caja rural de aquí del Caliche, la Nueva Esperanza del Caliche, pero confiando en Dios y en la buena voluntad de los donantes, de la junta directiva, de los técnicos extensionistas de campo, creo que vamos a seguir adelante con la fe puesta en Dios. Sí, pues voy a mostrarles, acá también tenemos el producto del pescado, pues no solamente tenemos lo que es la agricultura, sino que también contamos nuestra pecera. Si la pueden ver ustedes. Miren, vamos nuestra pecera para complementar lo que es ya el alimento. También venimos para acá. Contamos con un gallinero. Vamos con un gallinero por aquí. Aquí pues la puerqueriza o chanchera. Aquí tenemos pues, un gallinero forrajero, a donde también los amigos de Cosecha Sostenible, pues, compañeros nos han enseñado a preparar nuestro propio concentrado para darle. Ustedes pueden ver el concentrado que la estamos alimentando gracias a las enseñanzas de Cosecha Sostenible Internacional. Seguimos acá. Este es el concentrado que se les da a las gallinas, pues tiene un gallinero forrajero acá. Vamos por acá, este otro. Tenemos también la pila, pues ellos hicieron lo posible de dar lo que ellos quisieran, pero aquí pues me había sobrado unas piecitas de cerámica, pues yo terminé de poner la pila para que se mirara más alegre. Por acá vamos a llegar a donde está aquí el horno donde la señora pues aquí ha pasado la cuarentena haciendo pan para seguir vendiendo. Entonces aquí mira usted el hornito que nos ha dado el chip y por acá vamos a seguir y creo que esto pues va a ser todo. También tenemos arbolitos por allá y gracias a Dios pues y Cosecha Sostenible pues hemos tenido todo esto, por lo que se requiere ese esfuerzo de cada uno de nosotros como productores para así seguir adelante, y en estos tiempos de crisis pues nos ha ayudado esto a seguir adelante. Muchas gracias, que Dios les bendiga. Desde el Caliche con amor, Nelson Cirilo Alvarado.
Farmers like Cirilo, who you just heard, Alberto and Felicia, are growing everything they need for a rich life, and they are doing it in a way that increases rather than decreases biodiversity, decreases rather than increases greenhouse gases in the atmosphere, and makes them infinitely more resilient to crises like COVID-19. If we're just talking about their two families, it's wonderful for them, but not of much consequence to the rest of us. But they are two of more than 3,000 Sustainable Harvest International families who've transformed 30,000 acres of degraded land to regenerative organic farms, planting more than 4 million trees over the last 23 years. They've done this mostly so their families can eat better and have more money to cover other basics like education, better housing, and healthcare. But they and we can all celebrate that they're also increasing biodiversity and drawing down 48,000 tons of carbon out of the atmosphere every year. This matters to all of us, but it's still a drop in the bucket compared to the challenges faced by humanity. So my greatest hope is that this drop in the bucket, along with others, can ripple out across the globe to create the level of change we need. For our part, SHI has set a scaling up vision to help 1 million farms transition to regenerative organic practices by 2030, in line with UN Sustainable Development Goals. We'll continue to work directly with some farmers, and we'll train other organizations, such as government agencies, to use our methodology to reach even more farms. In this way, we plan to help lead the way to a paradigm shift for the 500 million small-scale farms that produce most of the world's food with almost no resources. If we help those 500 million farms become regenerative, like Alberto and Felicia's farm, they'll draw down 6 billion tons of carbon from the atmosphere into the soil every year, which is equivalent to closing every coal-fired plant on Earth, which also happens to be the goal of the 4 per 1,000 initiative. And they'll create 3 billion acres of habitat for more biodiversity. That's 30 times bigger than all the national parks in the United States combined. And they'll also provide more nutrient-dense, poison-free food for all of us. It currently costs SHI $6,500 to support a farmer through our 5-year program. Not bad if you look at it as equivalent to getting a college degree, but multiplied by the 500 million smallholder farms, it adds up to a hefty price tag. We've always stretched every penny to do as much as possible, but now in the face of the kind of change we think humanity needs to make if we want to survive, we're taking a fresh look at how to significantly lower the cost for achieving at least our core desired outcomes, such as drawing down carbon out of the atmosphere back into degraded land. As we move forward towards our scaling up goal, it's my hope that we can better entice others to adopt our methodology by cutting the net cost to $250 per farm per year for 3 years. At this price point, it would cost around $30 billion per year for 12 years to help all 500 million smallholder farms transition to regenerative organic farming. You may think that 30 billion per year should sound like a lot to a woman who's struggling to get her nonprofit's budget past 1.5 million. And okay, yes, I'll admit that on some levels, 30 billion does sound like a huge amount to me. But not so much when I think about the fact that governments of the world provide $600 billion a year or more in subsidies to industrial agriculture, GMOs, globalized exports, and factory farms, all of which are collectively responsible for about half of the world's greenhouse gas emissions. So if we're talking about redirecting 5% of current government subsidies away from degenerative farming to regenerative farming, $30 billion doesn't sound so big anymore, especially not when I consider that it could end hunger and poverty for 500 million families while also saving a livable planet for all of us. And as Gabo said, it is not true that people stop pursuing dreams because they grow old. They grow old because they stop pursuing dreams. I hope you share my dream of a food system based on the love of life and nature, and that together we will regenerate the earth, starting with smallholder farms. Thank you. And I hope I've left time for some questions or thoughts. Thanks, everyone.
So if you have questions or comments, please unmute yourself and then remute yourself.
It looks like there were a lot of chats and I haven't looked
Yeah,
at them.
why don't you look through those, Flo? And
Okay.
there are a number of questions in there. I'm sure that.
Should I start with those or what's the protocol? Sorry.
Either way, if somebody wants to speak up, that's fine. But you can also go through the chat.
I just love this presentation, and since I have so many friends in Africa who do grow vegetables, it was amazing to see your work. I would love to put it in my newspaper one day, and I just wrote a quick email to one of my friends saying, no offense to anybody else, but I think this could be the most important workshop of all.
Oh, wow. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. I'm a real grassroots person, down to earth. Now I will mute myself.
I've been wondering where to put my stimulus money. I think I might have an idea.
Oh, I love hearing that. And speaking of the importance of grassroots, I'd have to share a quote from one of the farmers who's worked with us in Belize as a collaborator. What did he said that he thinks that to understand God, we don't need to start in church. We need to start with the we organisms in the soil. And I always like that.
Flo,
I have-
I wonder if you could, I put this in the chat, but what do you hear from the farmers that you work with in, say, in Honduras about the outflow of people emigrating, this outflow of people fleeing poverty
Mhm.
and social unrest and heading for the border, whether it's Mexico or the United States or whatever? What do you hear about that?
Well, mostly they talked to us about it in the context of our program, and many of them have thanked us that their children have chosen to abandon plans to try to get to the U.S. to find work, to send money home, because they know all the dangers involved with that. I mean, even before the current changes with the current administration, and so they're very grateful that their families are being shown a way that they can get by on their land. They love their rural communities. The vast majority want to stay in their communities, their close-knit communities with their extended families, if they can provide a decent quality of life. And the ones that leave because they just don't see a way to feed their children adequately, to provide even the basics. And we've have a number who have written to us and told us, even some who have gone to the US, worked there, come back hoping to reestablish themselves in their communities, found that by the time they got back, they were out of money again, and were thinking about, again, trying to come back to the US to try to find work again, to try to get some more money. But then they joined the Sustainable Harvest program and found that they could do much, much better that way. And I think, I hope it's not too political to say, but I calculated out what the cost of that border wall that our president talks about would be. And if that was invested in Honduras in providing this type of technical assistance to farmers, and I think it could pretty much end the immigration problem, because people could stay on their land, not feel forced into the cities, which often lead them into sweatshops or crime or problems with gangs, not feel forced to try to make the dangerous trip to the US, but could allow them to do well in their own communities.
Florence, this is Charlie from Maryland. Just to follow up to what Bob just said, are there any governments that you're aware of down in the global south that would be both stable enough and receptive enough to try and adopt this as a national policy?
Well, this is one of the questions that that we're trying to answer now. Sustainable Harvest set the vision that I mentioned for scaling up. We set our vision a couple of years ago. Since then, we've done a scalability analysis. We've started filling in information gaps to create a plan. We intend to have our first plan done by June. We've got very limited staff outside of the field trainers, so it's not going quite as quickly as we would like. But we do feel there are some countries who could, and I think maybe even have adopted this approach. And I have to check my notes to see who's already made some progress in that regards. But speaking from our experience, we've spoken with the environment minister in Panama this past February. He seemed very receptive and asked if we would assign some of our staff to work with some of his staff and create a proposal for spreading out a program like ours throughout Panama. And then he'd like to jointly take that proposal to the agriculture minister to see if the agriculture extension program in Panama could be shifted away from handing out chemicals to instead providing technical assistance like we've been providing. This was just a first initial conversation. This is all new enough to me and to us that I don't have a good sense of whether this will happen, how likely it will, but it seems promising. The agriculture ministry in Belize has also shown an interest. And so I think there definitely are possibilities. I think I've heard Bhutan, that agroecology is sort of their agricultural model. And I was told that they were successful because the agrochemical companies were not able to buy off, well, maybe they were able to buy off the politicians, but then the monarch in Bhutan trumped that and was able to keep the focus on agroecology. There's a state in India, I believe, that has gone completely organic. Was it Senegal? I should know.
Sikkim.
What's that?
Sikkim.
Oh yes, yeah, in India, yes. And there's
Yes.
also a country in Africa that has tried this, I think, but I don't remember the details. I think in Africa it was Senegal, but I could follow up on that. Hans Herren from the Millennium Institute was telling me about some of the places where the countries have embraced this idea to varying degrees, but it's always, I think, a battle against the lobbyists from the companies that are selling the chemicals and the GMOs.
What about Guatemala? What's the state there?
I don't know too much. I would guess that it's similar to Honduras. That would be my guess, but I haven't. I've visited Guatemala, but I have not worked there. I know that there are some organizations working there that are interested in working with us and have. Reginaldo from the Regenerative Agriculture Alliance. He's from Guatemala and has done some work there. So he would know a lot more. He's based in the U.S. now, but if you'd like to know more, I could put you in touch with Reginaldo.
I have a question that I had already put in the chat box. This is Howard Bernstein in Billerica, Mass.
Okay, I'm sorry I couldn't keep up with the chat.
Yeah, sure. My question is this: first of all, the assumption that no one participant family is supported indefinitely. I'm wondering what kinds of long-term results you're seeing with regard to the families after you've stopped the direct support. How well do they continue this without annual support? And are they spreading? Are the methods being spread from one participant to non-participants in their village or within their family networks?
Thanks for that question. So our current model that we've been using for a number of years now, we generally work with the group of families for 5 years. And then at the end of the 5 years, if they have completed the 5 phases of work, they graduate from the program. There's always a big celebration, graduation ceremony. They get diplomas. They usually have a band come and there's dancing and there's food and big celebration. Their family members come from all over the country. It's a really wonderful celebration. And currently after that, we have very limited contact, no official contact with the families. We end up checking in with them periodically and hearing from them. But we did do a survey about a year ago and went out to visit hundreds of families who had graduated from the program over the last, I think, 7 years. We found that 91% of them were still using the regenerative agriculture practices that they had learned with our program. Maybe not using 100% of what they learned, but using multiple regenerative agriculture practices. Almost all of them were continuing to eat better. There were continuing positive impacts on the environment. And they continued to have an improved income. That's an area that wasn't as strong as we'd like to see it. So as part of our scaling up plans, we want to look at possible changes in our methodology. One we might test out is shifting to 3 years of intensive training to get the core environmental and productivity results we want, and then having a longer term relationship after that, but not as intensive and based more around helping with the marketing of the crops and the business side of it. And we hope in a way that will also generate some income to offset the costs of providing the technical assistance. So those are some of the ideas that we're looking to explore.
And what about Excuse me.
Oh, and
what
the ripple
about,
effect.
yeah,
Yes.
sure. Thank you.
That's a study that we have yet to do and would like to do. We hear a lot of anecdotal evidence that people come to the farms of people in our programs and people who graduated from the program. There was one small study done in Honduras years ago that found that every farmer who graduated was training an average of 7 more farmers. But we don't feel that that was a solid enough study to say that that's really what's happening across the board. So we need to study that further, find out how much is really happening. And then based on that, one of the other areas that we've identified to explore for our scaling up plans is to see whether we can create a more structured farmer to farmer training program so that it's not our agronomists providing all of the technical assistance, that they could work in conjunction with farmer mentors so that we can reach a larger number of farmers for less money.
Flo, I think there's time for one more quick question, if there is such a thing.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, this is Charlie. I'm just wondering, your talk was great. It covered a lot of really important points. Is this summarized in any kind of presentation on your website?
This presentation is going to be turned into a blog post that will go up on our website within the next week, I hope.
Well, that'd be awesome.
And
if I could say, if people didn't catch our website, sustainableharvest.org, I'd love for you to go there and sign up for our email list. We usually send out emails only maybe once a month. But then you would get news about things like the new blog posts, about opportunities once travel is possible again to visit the communities, if that's where we work, if that's of interest to anybody, and other news about the work.
And this presentation will be on our website soon. Flo, thank you very much. That was great.
Sorry, I see there's questions in the chat that I didn't get to. Maybe I could try to chat the answers to them, or.
And that's the opportunity this afternoon at 1:30 during your workshop.